Last week, we had massive news about some of America's biggest banks making big moves into the Bitcoin and crypto space. Whether it was JP Morgan, Bank of America, or Vanguard, it seems like the big players are suddenly changing their tune. Maybe the financial incentives are just getting too big. Luckily for us, the good news doesn't stop there, because we've started to see more dominoes fall in this race. Welcome to 1% Bitcoin, and today we're giving you more hype than you've ever seen before in your life, which is a rarity for us because we try and keep things balanced. But once again, guys, we are just two guys on the internet who enjoy Bitcoin. We are not financial advisors. We instruct you to consult a fiduciary before making any financial decisions. All investing is risky, but investing in Bitcoin and digital assets is particularly risky. We try to do our best to give you a balanced view, but on days like today, when you get headlines like I'm about to show you, it becomes very hard to. But luckily, we've got our tool that will try and keep it as balanced as possible and cut out the narrative and just give you the reality.
And can I ask, make one request to please like and subscribe our channel and our videos, because it genuinely helps us understand what type of news you want us to cover and what you want more of, right? It pushes it to people who really actually need to receive this content. So thanks.
Absolutely. And yeah, don't forget, guys, if there are any stories that you come across that you want scored in an impartial way to know whether you actually should be following them or whether you should just ignore them, whether it's just FOMO or whether it's FUD, just let us know. Feel free to drop a comment with the link to them in our videos, and we will do our best to run them through the scoring system or reply to your comment with an overview of what the news is saying. So today's first story. $12 trillion Charles Schwab to launch Bitcoin and Ethereum trading in 2026. So for those of you that don't know, Schwab is a $12 trillion brokerage and one of the largest retail platforms in the United States. They've confirmed they will launch Spot Bitcoin and Ethereum trading, as I said, in 2026. Now, this will begin with internal testing, a client pilot, in other words. Then it will be followed up with a full rollout. So Schwab clients already own 20% of all crypto ETPs, which are exchange traded products, basically like an ETF. Now, the move poses a major pricing and trust-based threat to US crypto exchanges like Coinbase due to Schwab's zero commission model, which a deep regulatory coverage and massive distribution footprint, which is why I started off by saying I'm so bullish on this, even though there is a bit of negativity. So despite me coming across like a kid in a candy store, the good news is that generally these stories that the tool has assessed, the manipulation level is low to medium. The stories are mostly fact-driven. There's a slight sensational favor, as you can probably tell by my framing. It frames Schwab as entering a crypto at scale, which obviously signals mainstreaming and Wall Street level validation. In terms of those emotions evoked, you've got excitement, inevitability, FOMO, competitive fear, and obviously acceleration and legitimacy. Now, in terms of the drivers, Schwab is massive, trusted, and obviously that's going to have a huge psychological impact. And what you're about to see is that the quantitative data actually backs that up. So the rollout is explicitly confirmed by Schwab CEO, and it's confirmed via Reuters. The CEO himself confirmed that the trading will indeed launch early 2026, specifically in Q1, and all of that is credible. Now, the rollout will follow stage testing, indeed, which will go employees, then a pilot group, then a broad release. So it's not like they're just jumping headlong into this without knowing what they're doing. Some people see that as a downside, that they're not just sort of rolling it out. I actually think it's a great thing that they're actually testing it with their own employees. Schwab clients do own around 20% of all US crypto exchange traded products, which is absolutely massive. So they haven't been letting their customers sit on the side. They just now want a bigger piece of the action. And obviously, Schwab's entry is going to only intensify institutional coverage, convergence into crypto following BlackRock, Fidelity, Vanguard, Bank of America, JP Morgan, which is really creating a powerful TradFi cluster. So, David, try and not do as I've done and try and, not seem like a kid in a candy store or a young girl at a Boyzone concert. Oh, God, I'm showing my age there. Obviously, it's positive.
Yeah.
how leaning.
You know what?
So
Yeah, I'm
John,
leaning I'm leaning positive, obviously, but you know what? This is another example of capitulation, right?
it
So
really is.
they are so late to the party, and they're just catching up to what is very clear demand from their clients, both retail and institutional investors. Um, this is quite bullish considering it's a $12 trillion in assets and AUM for this bank, or this institution. So it's I would give it I mean, they have access to so many clients and investors. So it's not they're not launching an ETF, right? But they are allowing trading and access to their customers. So I'd give it a a 3, actually. Quite bullish.
So actually way off. I was going to actually, I didn't want to sway you, but I was going to remind you of what the tool turned out last week for the Bank of America Vanguard. They were all clustering around the 4s and the 5s. So this is
Interesting.
slotted in. This is slotted in really perfectly with that. Now, in terms of the reasons why, obviously, Schwab announcing you picked up on the $12 trillion. Schwab announcing that its $12 trillion platform is going to offer Bitcoin and Ethereum trading in 2026. It's a major future catalyst because it gives tens of millions of US investors a direct path to crypto through the same brokerage accounts they use for stocks, bonds, and retirement investing. So obviously in a previous video, we spoke about BCPE in France doing something similar. It's exactly the same type of story, but obviously it scores higher. I think that one scored in the 4s because it was a European bank. And even though that bank was the second largest in France, it's still nothing compared to the reach that Schwab has. So while the story doesn't create flows today, otherwise it would be higher, the product isn't live until 2026. It does signal that one of America's largest investment platforms has already committed to integrating Bitcoin into its core offering. The fact that they've actually called out Bitcoin, Ethereum specifically. So it's significant institutional validation, similar to the early stages of the ETF movement. However, because the launch is in the future and because investors can't buy Bitcoin on Schwab yet, the immediate impact is smaller than live execution stories like the BlackRock profitability from IBIT. It does, however, outperform sovereign announcements that we've seen, like Kazakhstan. You may remember a couple of weeks ago, we had Kazakhstan come in at a 4.1. And obviously it outpaces most other regulatory stories because Schwab's distribution footprint, to put it otherwise, is absolutely enormous. It is huge. They are a massive asset manager. So once the product goes live, access friction for tens of millions of retail and retirement accounts collapses. So how are we to visualize this for our viewers? Simple terms, they're not moving Bitcoin today, but when they do, it could be one of the largest retail on-ramps in the world, which is why it ranks high, but not at the very top of our registry for the tool.
To that point, I think that's why the tool is scoring this so high. It's because it's the huge opportunity of onboarding. It's basically an onboarding funnel for Gen Z and millennials, right? That's huge, huge investor base that they now have access to within their Schwab accounts to be able to access Bitcoin. And it's great for Bitcoiners too, because it, as you said, it calls out specifically Bitcoin and Ethereum. These are the top 2 crypto, or by market cap amongst all the crypto. So it really focuses investors in on those two tokens.
Really interesting that the tool pulled this out as a negative. I kind of alluded to it at the start, but obviously because they've got a no-fee platform, obviously that has a huge competitive impact against exchanges, centralized exchanges like Coinbase, like Kraken, like Binance. Why would you use one of them if Schwab is able to offer you far better fees and you're allowed to do it in one platform?
Yeah,
like it is a really big move, and I think that's why the tool has actually scored it higher. I mean, it's given that as it's highlighted that as a negative because obviously that increases TradFi dominance and it also could risk more centralization. But overall, it's kind of pointing out that actually, I mean, the industry needs a shake up. Yeah, Coinbase, the fact is Coinbase does have a bit of a monopoly at the moment. Almost all of the TradFi giants who have their own ETFs are custodying with Coinbase. So having someone come in that's actually saying, hey, we're going to enable you to do everything in our platform, you won't even need to touch Coinbase, I think is great. And Schwab has such a historic name and in America and in American finance that I think it's absolutely massive. It's scored higher than the Vanguard story because they've already been enabling ETF buying, and now they've just gone full hog. So real big major positive for Bitcoin, and one that we will most certainly be monitoring for. And I estimate a number of years we'll be looking at this.
You know, Charles Schwab is the most conservative, slow-moving, regulation-obsessed broker in the United States. So
I did not know.
They are. So for them to finally capitulate here and offer this is massive.
That's probably why the tool has scored it higher as well. Probably why. Yeah, well, amazing. And I wonder, for all the mum and pup investors out there that would not touch crypto with a barge pole, I wonder how many of them know this. I'm sure they're just completely unaware. I think that if you are watching this and if you have friends or family who trust big names but maybe don't trust Bitcoin, send them this video. Yeah, get their response. Yeah, it might interest them. So yeah, a really meaningful piece of news. But the good news does not stop there, hence my giddiness for today. Because we have PNC Bank has become the first major US bank to allow private clients to buy, sell, and hold spot Bitcoin directly inside of their digital banking accounts. Powered, get this, surprise, surprise, shocker, by Coinbase's institutional infrastructure. It's nice to see a bank or asset manager use someone other than Coinbase. Well, it would be nice to see if anyone actually did it. But this integration obviously signals a major leap in traditional finance adoption and provides a seamless Bitcoin exposure pathway for high net worth clients. So what does the narrative want you to believe? It wants you to believe that major US banks are now entering spot Bitcoin markets. Good news is the manipulation level, when you read articles like this, is actually very low. Yeah, it is indeed the first US bank with spot Bitcoin access, and the narrative does align closely with verifiable facts. So this is going to promote institutional legitimacy and on-platform Bitcoin activity, which David and I are not huge fans of, but you can make up your own mind. In terms of the emotions, obviously specifically amongst institutional investors or more risk-averse investors, it's going to provide emotions of confidence. And amongst people like me, the giddy little schoolgirls, it's going to produce feelings of excitement and FOMO. But most of all, for David, it's going to produce validation. Yeah, the validation that we always knew that these big players, despite what they were telling us, despite saying they would never get involved, were always going to capitulate. So what are the facts? It is the first bank in the US to offer spot Bitcoin integration. Bitcoin access is going to be embedded in their digital banking platform. It is going to be powered by Coinbase, and it removes the need for external crypto exchanges. So once again, threat to Coinbase and to those other exchanges which have had a monopoly. Coinbase will still handle their custody and compliance and execution, but obviously you'll be able to do that directly from within the PNC app. Now, the offering obviously provides a secure, compliant access to Bitcoin. Some negatives from the facts. The access is obviously limited to private banking clients only. PNC does not have custody, does not custody the assets internally, which once again creates a big golden goose in terms of Coinbase's holdings, and I would say makes them a target potentially for attack as an attack vector. There's no confirmation of expansion to retail clients. Typical that these big banks will enable their wealthy clients to get in first and before rolling it out to retail, people like you and me. But in terms of some of the things that people could get wrong, as I said, people assume that they're going to be holding the Bitcoin themselves. They're not. They assume that it's a full-out retail rollout. It's not. It's to their private bank customers, and specifically their high net worth customers only. And obviously, all the execution is going to be handled by Coinbase. So, David, I'm going to give you a bit of help with this one.
Okay.
Last story was a 5.1 with Schwab. Yeah. Do you think this is going to be higher or lower than Schwab?
Oh, it's a tough one because the thing is, they're a very conservative bank, right? They're one of the most conservative in the United States. So for them to actually capitulate, another example of capitulation, right? They're following client demand. I would say it's a little less bullish just because of their kind of platform and their access to clients. I would give it a 4 as a score.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, if it makes you feel any better, because the tool obviously takes out any personal opinion and subjectivity as far as possible, I actually agreed with you. I thought this was going to score lower than the Schwab story, but it didn't. Surprisingly,
Interesting.
It scored a 5.8 because I'll highlight this part: actual Bitcoin exposure inside a bank account. Yeah. It's actual Bitcoin that is going to be accessible in the bank. So click buy Bitcoin through the bank. The commitment is direct. So PNC, becoming the first major US bank to offer spot Bitcoin trading inside the digital banking platform, is one of the most meaningful institutional adoption events so far because it collapses nearly all of the friction involved in buying Bitcoin. Instead of opening Coinbase account, wiring funds, passing new KYC, and deciding on custody, wealthy clients now just tap buy Bitcoin inside the same app they already use to pay bills, transfer money, and manage their investments. PNC is a top 10 US bank. If it wasn't a top 10 US bank, it would not have scored above Schwab. But the fact that it is in the top 10 and the fact that obviously they can move their Bitcoin directly off the platform if they want to from within the app is a huge plus. And even though the rollout is limited to private banking clients, which is another reason why I thought it would score lower, it sets a precedent that the other banks can now follow using the same Coinbase custody rails. So the likelihood is that other banks will start to actually say, yep, you can actually access your Bitcoin from within your bank account, but you'll be able to do like PNC clients can do and actually move it off. You have like a way to actually formally get it off as opposed to just being able to see it in that account and sell it for cash. So it's more impactful for Bitcoin adoption than regulatory approvals or sovereign experiments like we've seen in Kazakhstan or Tajikistan, because it creates real immediate pathways for real money to flow into Bitcoin. It doesn't just signal legitimacy, it operationalizes it. In simple terms, PNC turns Bitcoin into a normal banking option. And once other major US banks do it, once they've done it, other major banks will follow. So this is how mainstream adoption happens, quietly at first, and then a loud scream. So any surprises there, David? Obviously, you were expecting it to be lower, but
yeah,
you disagree with anything that's all turned out there?
It's really insightful what the tool has picked up here because the BRS, because initially I thought, you know what, it just gives them access to Bitcoin, but it's owned by the bank still at the end of the day. They don't physically own it, but it makes a good point, or you make a good point where you kind of highlight that it gives them the opportunity to be able to invest in it in the spot Bitcoin, and then they could self-custody it at a later time. So it's that it increases both adoption and the opportunity for sovereignty, self-custody. So that's brilliant. I think that pathway is quite bullish.
That's it. And I think that look, the fact that it's limited to wealth clients isn't ideal, and that was one of the reasons why I thought it would have scored lower. But the fact is when I queried the tool about that, what it basically said is that the likelihood is that they just want their wealthiest that they just want their wealthiest clients to profit first, and that they will roll out. The other thing they highlighted about why I scored higher than Schwab, interestingly, was because Schwab's clientele, although massive, already hold a large amount of ETF products, of Bitcoin ETF products. So they're the largest holders of Bitcoin ETF products. So the uptick that you would expect from Schwab enabling these type of things is actually less because they've already got their clients access. A large portion of their clients already have access. Besides with PNC, it's not the same case.
Right.
Yeah. The 20% is nowhere near as high at PNC. So this will have far more of a larger move.
The other element of this that's really important to draw out is PNC is a bank, right? This represents more of a savings account for investors rather than a trading account. With Schwab and maybe this is why what the tool picked up is this is about owning the physical spot asset and holding it, right, and storing it, or hodling it, as we say.
Well, look, I'm not an expert on this, and maybe I've misinterpreted something that the tool said. But my understanding from reading the articles is that the way that these other operations will work is that you'll be able to buy and sell cryptocurrency from within those apps, from within your banking app. However, when you go to sell, it's not like you'll be selling it back into something else. It will just move to your bank account. It will just be cash. How it settles in the back end with, say, USDC or whatever they do in the back end won't matter. Besides, you won't really have the ability to withdraw the Bitcoin from the account. With PNC, it's basically, from the sounds of it, like a whole exchange product. Yeah.
Wow.
So you'll be able to actually buy the Bitcoin from your cash account, buy it, and then send it directly off to a cold wallet if you want to.
Incredible.
Obviously, please correct me if in the comments if we've got anything wrong or if the tool's misinterpreted anything. Obviously, we want to know. Are there any final thoughts or questions that you want to ask, David? Any final points you want to point out for our viewers?
No, I think it's just another example of these big institutions that are traditionally conservative that are having FOMO, and they're following the client demand. They're saying we can't afford to stay out of this market and limit access to our clients. So this is fantastic.
Because I think that's a great segue into our outro there, David. Because don't forget, it's not just retail that has it that is at risk of missing it. It's also the institutions. Because don't forget, guys, most will miss it, most will mock it, and most will wait until it's too late. But the 1%, they're with conviction.
Be a 1%er. Thanks, folks.
See you later.
Bye-bye.